Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic this month in WordPress and Tech. It's episode 768. We've got some great guest panelists. Some of the regulars are swan off to Europe or wherever on their holidays. But I've managed to find some friends of the show that was prepared to join us. We've got some fabulous stories. We're going to be talking about a recent interview from the co-founder of WordPress, Matt Malweg, talking about AI, the robots. We're going to be talking about a great podcast, No Mercy, and techno-narcissism. We've got Seth Godin. What more could you ask, audience? It's going to be a great show. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, starting with the ladies. We've got Katie Keith, co-founder and CEO of Barn2. So, Katie, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yep. No, hi, everyone. I'm Katie. As Jonathan said, I'm from Barn2 Plugins. We sell WordPress plugins, mostly WooCommerce, although not exclusively. We're a UK company, but we're based all over the world, and I actually live in Spain now. So when we say we're a UK company, we're a global company, really.
Yeah. Got a great friend of the show, semi-regular over the years. We've got Brian Jackson of Forgemedia, another great WordPress plugin shop. So, Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Brian Jackson, co-founder of Forgemedia. It's just a two-person little agency I run with my brother. We have two plugins, Perf Matters and NovaShare. A lot of it is focused on speed and performance. So we're basically waking up every day trying to speed up WordPress. That's what we're doing.
I've got my co-hosts, my regular co-host for the interview part of this show. Got Kurt. Kurt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Jonathan. My name is Kurt Von Annen. I own an agency called Mañana No Mas, where we do business consultancy and assist people with WordPress projects like e-learning and membership sites.
I've got another co-host on my other podcast, the Membership Machine Show, which is rapidly growing, I like to say, getting great numbers now. Spencer Forum, would you like to introduce yourself?
I think we're in episode 927 of that show.
It feels like it. It's like cat years, actually. 30 episodes feel like 90. That's about right.
It's Spence from WPLaunchify.com, or now available on all social media at spencerforeman.com or Spencer Foreman. And I'm very happy to finally meet Katie, because I'm watching Katie's posts on Twitter as she goes through the journey of trying to find somebody to help them with their expansion and marketing. And I enjoy her posts greatly, because I am an outlier of opinion, as many who follow the show know and otherwise. So I enjoy watching somebody go through the process and see what they think about it. So.
Yeah, right. I've been told, Spencer, that I've been told by a few people only listen to our show for the bickering between the two of us, actually.
This is not where you come for mainstream opinion, but a lot of entertainment between the cracks. Maybe not as much on this show anymore, but we'll see. But on the other shows, for sure.
All right, before we go into the main part of this great show, I've got a couple messages from our major sponsors. We will be back in a few moments, folks.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Lifter LMS, the leading learning management system solution for WordPress. If you or your client are creating any kind of online course, training-based membership website, or any type of e-learning project, Lifter LMS is the most secure, stable, well-supported solution on the market. Go to lifterlms.com and save 20% at checkout with coupon code podcast20. That's podcast20. Enjoy the rest of your show.
We're coming back, folks. Just want to point out, got some great special deals from the sponsors. Plus, I've got a curated list of the best WordPress plugins that can help you build out your websites for clients or for yourself, so you don't have to trawl the internet and spend about 5 days trying to find the best solutions. Where you can find this, go to the WP-Tonic/deals, go to WP-Tonic/deals, and you find all the goodies there, folks. What more could you ask for? maybe more, but you're not going to get it.
Maybe a kickback.
I don't know. It's very little that you get from this world, that's for sure. So, had a great interview with the co-founder of WordPress, Matt Egg, talking about all things Gutenberg, AI, revolution. So, Katie, what did you think of this interview?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I saw a bit of that kind of talk as well at his keynote Q&A at WordCamp Europe. And I really like his positive attitude to AI. He kind of sees it as an opportunity and seems to have thought quite deeply about it. And there was a lot of good analogies in it, things like inventions of like when photos were invented and cameras, that people were saying, like, art isn't needed anymore. And he drew an analogy between that and AI, which I thought was interesting, that we still need real people to do things. It's different. It has a new additional purpose in our society and our work. It doesn't mean that people are obsolete or anything. So I thought he had some interesting insights.
Yeah, right. Brian, what did you think of it, Brian?
Yeah, no, I thought it was interesting. I think I liked his main point about just playing with it for right now, is what he was talking about. And that's kind of what I've been doing, because most of my career, I've been a content producer.
Yeah.
Now I'm more kind of on the development side, but as a content producer, AI is a little scary in my opinion, because I mean, you can literally I have actually Google Bard pinned to my Mac dock right now. Like I can open it in 10 seconds and ask it anything I want. And literally like I can say like spit out a 5,000 word article about how to install a WordPress plugin, and boom, I have it. Like, so that's scary in terms of content production. But
I hope you read it before you post it.
No,
it's riddled with errors.
There's definitely a lot of problems. So,
Right.
but we're just in the first iteration of all this stuff. So like, there's bound to be hordes of problems. But recently I've kind of turned to positive, kind of like Matt's approach, as in I've just been integrating it into my daily workflow and like slowly finding more and more things where it can save me time. Like, the other day I needed to create a chart for someone, and I literally just asked Google Bard, like, create a chart for the last 20 years, like, and give me the numbers per each year.
Yeah.
And it just spit out a chart. And now they have this little export to Google Sheets option. So I went from nothing to a bar chart in Google Sheets in like 10 seconds. Like that before, I mean, even while I was working at Kinsta, like it would take me a while to make charts before.
Yes.
And now you can just do it willy-nilly. So that stuff I find is actually really cool as a marketer. But again, I think the whole content game is going to be changed forever, unfortunately.
How do you're an expert on this. So how do you got any thoughts about how Google will handle this? One way I thought is that they're going to really, obviously they've been utilizing this technology for a few years in them scraping or spidering websites anyway, and I think they're going to utilize signals which kind of give them the signal that this is content from a real. They're going to prioritize content that has a human element to it, either audio, obviously that can be made now by AI, but group content, any kind of content that has engagement or seems obvious, is established podcasts, established YouTube channel, anything that gives an indication that a real person made it. They're going to give that more relevance. That's how I see one of the ways they're going to handle this. What do you think, Brian?
No, I agree. And I think it's more important than ever to establish your own like persona on your stuff that you're making, because that's something people will still come back to follow, regardless of if you're going to show up in Google or not. So like, I mean, Twitter profile, Substack, your YouTube channel, like those are good examples of ways to diversify to maybe get people still coming to your content. Whereas I think search engine optimization though is drastically going to change. And I don't think people realize, some people, from what conversations I've seen, I don't actually think they realize what's coming even yet. But as far as content go, personally, I'm still focused on like the really niche stuff that like no robot knows what I'm doing every day. I'm so far down in the weeds in WordPress that people are still going to try to find that content. And so I'm just focused on that stuff right now when I'm publishing, instead of the more broad general stuff, because that's the stuff that AI can just whip out willy-nilly. So I think focus on as niche as you can go nowadays is what I'm focused on.
So, Spencer, in some ways, I thought it was a archetypal, typical interview with the great leader. What was your feelings about it?
I mean, first of all, I have said this before. Like, I love that Jamie is really pushing a specific, easy to understand niche of content, right? So he has taken up the banner of the full site editor, and he and I are on opposite sides of the fence. But in this case, he's also, you know, scored himself a conversation with Matt. The content itself was fine, but without repeating what everyone has said here, which I agree, the problem is that I don't criticize Matt for having an obligation to be more specific, but I criticize his lack of top-down leadership about the way that the development of WordPress and the feature sets are unfolding. And that relates to, for example, the full site editor. That relates to things like yesterday there was a post that I had to comment on in the tavern about, like, they're just deciding to turn like blocks into patterns and patterns into a new name. And they're just, the difficulty stems from the fact that the development cycle of WordPress has always been a small community of people who are facing consumers, who are delivering products, who are hands-on in the field selling stuff. And now I think because of the developmental need to be a React developer and expertise, the people who are making fundamental changes are doing it without any interaction at all in a meaningful way with the people who use the tools to build for themselves or build for clients. And so the things that they're doing now, and I'm not criticizing the developers because I'm in GitHub talking to them, it's like they're completely detached, just like in a normal big corporation. The developers live in one world, the C-suite people live in another, and the middle managers live in another. And in a normal corporation, there's a profit motive and a way to proof out what happens. In WordPress, it's just, what the hell? Let's just change some core stuff randomly and see what the hell, even down to naming conventions. So when he starts going off on this conversation about AI, and how he's going to plug it into this and plug it into that, and it's, you know, full site editing,
Jetpack,
Drupal, Jetpack and Drupal and Jetpack and this and that. And I'm like, who's steering the goddamn ship of this entire thing? Because this isn't the conversation we need now. We need, like, can we have a committee that's published in public, not through GitHub or something else, where those of us who make our livelihood selling plugins as we do, talking as an agency as we do, building our own solution, have an actual voice in the fact that you're randomly, willy-nilly trying to throw stuff in. Now, AI, for a Gen Xer like me, is exciting. But you know what? I literally was on the phone call with one of my bigger clients with this morning saying, a certain age group, 40 plus, okay, can they use AI? Sure. Do they want to use AI on their own? No. What they want now is a human being to be the curator, the concierge, the liaison between all of the new things that are coming, because it's iterating so fast. They have no desire to jump on that train of, like, I got to learn 8 million things that change every day. So when I hear conversations, I agree with the philosophy that, like, it is not to be feared, but the new opportunities for all of us are going to be to build personal relationship type businesses, whether through our software or our agency, because the customers, at least the Gen X age and older, who will want that is enormous. They can't keep up with the pace of all the tweaking in the technology. And I think that's where it applies to WordPress. 2 columns, those that want to tinker, those that want solutions. And Jamie, I love him to death, is in the tinkerer mode. And I'm in the column of the solutions mode. And I even related this to Katie when I was tweeting with her. All my customers come to me like, WordPress is a mess. Why can't you be like Wix or Weebly or Squarespace, or just give me the features ready to use? instead of a flea market of 54,000 things. With, by the way, they're changing the name of the interface while we go.
Yeah, well, it's got to be done. It's got to be done. So, Kurt, my beloved co-host, can you imagine me interviewing Matt? How do you think that would go?
He wouldn't give you the interview.
It would go, because as soon as the interview started and I was watching it, I thought, well, Matt's bringing his cadence and his tone to the interview. Like he should trademark the way that he speaks. Like it's very recognizable.
What do you mean?
That said, I was horribly disappointed in the interview. It's cool to see Matt talk. It's cool to see him, address things. But when I compare it to the stuff that you and I have talked about on podcast, Jonathan, about AI, or I've heard Spencer talk about it, he compared it as an invention like glasses to contact lenses, the camera thing. And I was like, okay, cool. We've all talked about that, but give me some specifics, man. Drill down about how this is really going to affect society or business. And I didn't get that insight. I didn't get an insight that was any better than what we've discussed in our own circles. And I'm expecting more, because he's at that higher circle, And so I was looking for more meat, and I just didn't see it. It was cool to see from Matt, but I just didn't get the content that I wanted.
He seemed a little bit tired at the interview. Interviews normally have ups and downs, but each interview, I've done enough of them, they have a certain tone to them, depending on the blend between the interviewer and the interviewee. I just found it was a bit flat. A lot of that flatness, obviously Jamie was a bit nervous, as you do when you have a big guest come on the show. But Matt came across a bit flat, actually.
We should collect a bounty to see like a over-under whether we could get Matt Mullenweg on either of our shows, because the distinction is, I was at
he would never do it. Yeah,
my back surgeries prevented me from going to Europe. I had the ticket. I gave it away to a nice person who asked for it. I couldn't go there, but never yet have I once seen him address anybody in any of the word camps or in public that's in a confrontational way, answering correctly like a normal human being would. Because Kurt's correct. There are two ways. I remember the days I was here in 2006 and 7 and 8 with all the initial drama where the real Matt Mullenweg was there. The one that was like slashing and burning with machete whenever anybody disagreed with them or went against the philosophy of open source. And now we've got oh, that's an interesting philosophy. Let's think about that. Yeah, we'll take it to a committee and blah, 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 and big picture. And the problem with that is that there's a team of people below him who have no direction. Love or hate a CEO like a crazy person like an Elon Musk, who's disappointing to me, but at least you understand how crazy he is. To be disingenuous in public versus, let's say, a Mark Benioff, who is really clear, or a previously living Steve Jobs, at least you know where they stand. And for the rest of us, we've been left to our own devices for this gigantic financial opportunity to pick a side.
I think Katie would understand this. It wouldn't be aggressive. Obviously, I was brought up by the BBC. When you're interviewing somebody in English culture, it can be, the questions asked can be a little bit more penetrating, can't they, Katie?
Yeah, because like the American media is very different, isn't it, to the British media and journalism and all of that. But yeah, I think Matt chooses his interviewers carefully these days. He's clearly been on some sort of media training, and he comes across as a politician that you wouldn't necessarily trust. So yeah, there is that. But it's interesting to see his insights. And I don't really mind that he didn't have so much content, because he's meant to be focusing on other stuff like the implementation of all the many Gutenberg phases and all of that. Do we want him to be distracted by very clear plans of putting AI into WordPress core or something? Or is that plugin territory, as he would say?
Yeah, that's great. All right, on to the next one from one of my favorite gurus, and I regularly listen to his podcasts, and that's Professor Galloway, and he did a fabulous write-up which called Techno-Narcissism. I think it slightly applies to the previous topic we were discussing. I thought there was some linkage here in my dyslexic how my dyslexic mind works. I saw definite connections between these two stories. So, Spencer, could you see a connection? Why I saw a connection, and what did you think of this great podcast, Techno Narcissism?
I mean, you and I discuss all the time because we have the benefit of hindsight. I mean, I think it could be you or I. I'm not sure who's the oldest one on this panel by a long shot, but you know what happens with right? I'm 56. I don't mind saying it. I'm not going to ask anybody else. I'm way older.
We're the
than you.
same. We're twinsies.
Oh, you're 56. Oh, you look like 42. So I give you that. Jonathan, we know, is 85, but that's we don't rub it in.
I feel 85. I feel 85 some days. Yeah.
Once you've been around the sun a few times, you start to see patterns in behavior, right? So I think like the cycle from 1968 to 2023 is there's a lot of parallels. But the point I'm getting at is from this article is that we're faced with a revolutionary change in the way things might go, but it's still, as we just talked about, has to filter through the human aspect of things. And in some cases, the promise of a new technology that concerns people can actually turn out to be like a dud, like a firecracker that goes off. They're neutering the hell out of AI as we speak. That might be one of the ways that it kind of slows the train down or doesn't reach mainstream. But even if it goes the other way, I'll use peak oil. Sometimes all the pundits and all the best known minds in the world think things are going to go a certain way based upon the facts you have at the moment from previous behavior. But then something changes fundamentally the entire equation, and it makes all the pundits and predictions unfair. Like they said peak oil because they thought all the oil was available only from these traditional drilling wells, and they didn't anticipate fracking, which then suddenly meant that we had more oil and natural gas than we could possibly burn without choking to death. And so now the problem is shifted to...
Well, if you're in Texas at the present moment, you're going to roast
or the ozone hole, which famously caused alarm and finally got people off their duffs. And they solved it in the sense like there was like the hole closed in about 10 years enough because they said, okay, let's all agree not to use CFCs.
Look at Brian. If he left his apartment now,
well, what I'm
saying, he would die. He would die.
What I'm saying is right now,
exhaustion.
Right now, they're threatening two choices. They're threatening Terminator scenario, or we're all going to be out of work because it's going to take over. And I'm like, I don't think it's that binary because, you know, what if theoretically the UFO disclosure guy turns out to be right? And it turns out that there's technologies all in front of us that they suddenly decide to share with us. And so I worry about today, tomorrow, and the next day, because when a client this morning said, my business plan for 2 years, I'm like, 2 years? Like, let's worry about 2 weeks from now. And I think for everybody, that's a good way to approach it.
2 years.
I mean, seriously, who can predict 2 weeks from now? Look at what's in the news as of the last month. I mean, really? Like, can anybody predict what's coming? There's a lot of change. But by the way, historically in human history, that is the recipe for good things coming, not without maybe turmoil and pain, but that storm comes through, shakes up the snow globe. And then on the other side of things, things can actually be better.
Right.
Could be worse, but could be better.
So, Katie, I've just thought it was an excellent piece. He kind of really hit on the nail a number of different things that I've been thinking about myself. The extreme, Terminators coming, or it's just going to improve it. The middle ground is probably with the truth, but it's also that technology and those that run it don't want the real discussion, and that real discussion is who gets to share the improvements, the economic improvements that technology can offer. And they literally, I've seen it, I live close to Silicon Valley, a couple 100 miles, and I've gone to a few conferences, and there's definitely the in crowd, and he just seemed to hit a load of things that over the months I've been thinking. Did it have that similar effect to you?
Yeah, I thought it covered a lot of really sensible points. Kind of sensible and moderated, but also cautiously optimistic. I thought it was an interesting point that I often think about when watching the news and things about various technological topics, that the regulation is always behind technology. And a lot of people are panicking and saying, oh, AI, it's going to be the end of the world. And this article was a bit more saying we just need to do the regulation. It's not an inherent problem, but we need to regulate and control it because this is a new thing and the laws aren't applicable and so on, which I think applies when lots of new things come in, that the legislators have to play catch up, and they're always slower than the technologists, of course. But one point it made that I thought was interesting was it made the point that just because we have a technology that could be dangerous doesn't mean the world's going to end. For example, I mean, we might still all die of nukes, but it made the point that there hasn't been a major nuclear incident for 80 years. And similarly, just because AI could
there's no threat there with Putin the Impaler just 1 second away from the button, is there? There's no risk that we're going to get blown up. I'm just having a
someone could read that article in 2 weeks if they're here to read it and say, well, how wrong that was, 80 years, and then it happened. But the point it made was that that's a long time, and that even if a technology can be dangerous, it doesn't have to spell disaster if managed correctly. And nukes are a good example. They're probably not managed that well, and people still know when to stop. But the other point it made that I thought was interesting was about what people are using it for. And one thing that gets me is people don't seem to get that most of it is currently a language prediction model.
Yeah.
And if people just understood that, they'd stop using it for factual information, for example. That's not what it is.
Well, it's really impressive, and it's impressive, but in the same way, it isn't impressive, Katie, because it isn't artificial intelligence. It's just a language processing engine, a highly sophisticated one that gets good results, but it can't work anything out or think, or we don't even know what thinking really is. The study that I've done in the subject, we don't have even a clear biological model. So, the idea that this obvious breakthrough of usability leads to the conclusion that you've got real progress in artificial intelligence. I don't know enough about it, but I don't see it being that linked. Am I on the right track there, Katie?
Yeah, well, what is intelligence? There is all that. Everything's a computer algorithm, and it's got the whole machine learning thing. There's always a step a bit further towards that, but I think AI is a bit of a kind of a buzzword, obviously, and everybody wants to label everything AI, like the most basic features.
I'm going to have a tattoo on my forehead, actually, Katie. Yeah.
Like, we've released an AI feature. And
come on, panel. That was a good one, panel. But there you go. Sorry, Katie.
I need the AI to tell me that was a joke.
All right. Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, God. Kurt, what did you think? What were some of the highlights? Did you think I thought it was a fabulous piece. What was your reaction?
I am not a consistent listener of this podcast or creator. And what I found interesting was he was incredibly snarky, but I loved his use of language and his metaphors and the colorful nature that he brought to it. So it was definitely entertaining. I also like a couple of his quotes a lot. And then when he talked about the sleight of hand of technologists is to pass on the guilt of like their crimes to the next generation. Like, no, we're building something. It's really cool. Don't worry about it. And then a generation later, it's a disaster, right? No, like, that wasn't our fault. You guys messed it up. And we can see that kind of coming to life now with a lot of social media ills and stuff that we have in society. So I can see where that came from. It was very insightful. And then his last quote at the end that I really liked was when he just said, we need more perp walks, because it's like things go horribly wrong. And we have this habit now of just shaming people or calling them out or whatever you want, whatever kind of committee or hearing we see. But there's no accountability, and everyone just collects their dollars and goes away with their little dunce cap on for a month or so.
You're
and then
you're banned for life by the Twitter committee. There we go. The Twitter keyboard warriors, so righteous in their anger, so eager to click away, aren't they, and do fuck all with their own lives. So Brian, some of the things that hit me, Brian, is that some of these people, like Elon Musk and some of the leaders, they see themselves as kind of quasi gods, you know, the hubris of the highest order, combined with attempt to bullshit the rest of society, so they don't really see. There were a couple of the key things, total hubris about their own abilities and their own belief, also kind of turning technology into a kind of quasi-religion. Was they some of the things that you were getting it from it, Brian?
No, actually, my main thought after reading this was Elon Musk was my main thought. Because they mentioned.
I'm sorry about that. I do want that to happen.
No, he mentioned like thinking they're gods, or I think he even mentioned like Jesus Christ in here or something. And whenever I've always been a person that thinks like the words you say matter, whether it's offline or online. And Elon Musk is just one of those people that I don't think he doesn't care what he says or who he says it to. And I just have a huge problem with that because the reach he has, especially with younger people, like people are just influenced so easily these days with social media and mainstream media that like I've just lost almost all respect I've had for him as a actual intelligent person. Because I think like Tesla, SpaceX, he's a brilliant person as far as like technology goes. I don't think anyone could argue against that. But as far as like how he behaves, I don't know. It's hard to like respect someone at the same time when they're on both sides. I mean, I would say I don't want to get political, but Trump is kind of the same way for me. Like the words you say matter. And it's just, once you stop, I don't have any respect for people that don't think that way, I guess is what I'm saying. And so that's kind of what I got from this with the tech leaders that just say whatever they want, don't give a care, think they're going to save the world. And maybe they will help save the world. But it doesn't mean I have to like how they're going about it, you know.
Well, I think I've learned the hard way because I'm the worst of the worst for this. But I tend not to send off an email straight away. I tend not to go on Slack and message somebody straight away when I feel like, especially when I get that urge to send it straight away. And wasn't there, I'm not sure if it was Jefferson, was there somebody in the American that said you should count to 30 before you open your mouth and say something to give you a few seconds to, do you want to say that? So I do agree with you there, Brian.
But it's one thing for you and then one thing for him with the amount of reach he has compared to anyone here. Like he knows the influence he has, and yet he still, you know, flaunts it all over. And so that's the problem I have with it. Is just
I used to listen to another podcast which some of the presenters have personal friends of Elon, the All In podcast. I can't listen to it anymore because it's become so politicized that I can't listen to it. I was prepared to listen when it was a bit about politics and about online and business, but now it's just become a mouthpiece for. But they all have that kind of attitude because they're all pretty wealthy and they don't care really, do they? But there we go.
Yeah. I agree with.
Yeah, go on.
I agree with what Katie was saying too, as far as like the language model thing. I think people like I don't think AI is going to become iRobot here and take over the world as robots, which I think some people are thinking is actually going to happen soon.
It's much worse than that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I view it more right now as like just a big scraper of the internet. That's kind of how I view AI at the moment.
Yeah. I don't think it's even clearly worked out that it's going to replace traditional search. In some elements of search, it obviously is. It is. In some ways, I just don't think it's totally clear how all this is going to pan out, really, Brian. Do you think I'm right about that?
No, I agree with. I don't think anyone can predict what's going to happen with this, just especially based on how AI kind of works.
Because the reason I say that, Brian, there was a big thing, that audio, you know, with the ladies that Spencer has in his house. Spencer's has a number of girlfriends that listen to every command. You're silent, actually, Spencer.
I have to be, because they'll hear me.
They hear
Siri.
He's ladies, but I understand the actual usage of the ladies is going down. It never took off as it was going to be the big replacement to normal search, wasn't it, Brian? At one stage, the ladies, but it never quite panned out, did it, Brian?
No, that's true, and it might be the same with. I don't know if anyone follows Midjourney, which is like the AI image generator, but if you've looked at that from just 2-year span, it's gone from doing like Quasimodo photos to literally pristine. You almost can't tell the difference from reality photos. And so I'm actually worried about that 5 years from now, because the progression for that has just been insane. That's even crazier than like the word content stuff. And so, I mean, the deep fakes from that, as far as politicians go, social media, like that is going to be a nightmare going forward, I think. And so when people find stuff they can abuse, like it will be abused. So the image stuff has me scared more actually than like kind of like the content side of it.
You know, I'll add on to that, because like Midjourney, I was actually discussing this morning as well, because they've shown like how it knows you can pull back and it just generates the full background of whatever it had made before. And it went from like Carnival Funhouse to photorealistic. But like, without being a Luddite, with any technology, what happens historically is that the fear gets replaced by people who recognize it for what it is and choose to ignore it or use something else. So for example, any of us who have school-age children still, I have 22, 19, and 12. My 12-year-old has not been taught how to write in cursive. They don't teach him any penmanship at all. My 22-year-old is where they stopped doing it. And when he signs a check, which by the way, what's a check? It looks like a ransom note. But the 12-year-old literally does not know how to write in cursive. So if I were to present him...
What's cursive? I don't even know what that is.
Well, like if I presented him stuff that we all grew up with, it was written
joined
in
up
longhand.
handwriting.
I could never do that as a dyslexic anyway, Katie.
Okay, but just, okay. So
why do you think I got into technology, Katie? So I've got a keyboard in front of me.
It's not part of his experience. And if he saw it, he ignores it. Okay, so what we're at is this cusp of a transition. But when you talk about things like fake images, fake video, fake whatever, we all grew up in an area where
it's a great place to breathe.
Yeah, he's in Chicago, the major city of America. Folks, he's frozen. It's so amusing as well. I'm gonna take a screenshot of that. That's really quite good. Actually.
He needs some of that Biden broadband money.
He does, doesn't he? So, listeners, at that, I think we're going to go for our break and give a few moments for Spencer to pay his internet bill. We will be back in a few moments, folks. Coming back, folks. Spencer's hopefully going to rejoin us. I just want to point out that if you're looking for a great WordPress hosting partner, why don't you look at WP-Tonic? We specialize in membership, community websites. We work with a number of WordPress professionals. We love to help you, and we've got a special partners offering for you specifically, and you can find that by going over to WP-Tonic/partners, WP-Tonic/partners, and we love you for us to help you with your next community or membership project. Hopefully Spencer will join us. Never know, do you? Let's go on to something more WordPressy. But I thought our discussion before the break was really great. Reusable blocks, rename patterns with... Who thinks of these titles in the tavern? They're getting bloody worse, aren't they? Obviously, Brian didn't write this. You never wrote it in titles like this, did you, Brian? They don't exactly come off the tongue, do they? So, Brian, what did you think of this, of where blocks are going, patterns, and where Gutenberg is going with full-site editing? Only small questions, Brian, but I know you're up to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've never used a pattern yet.
You don't know what you're missing. You don't know what you're missing.
I don't, and so I had to read the article to even understand what it was talking about.
Was it well
like
written?
I use a lot I use a lot of blocks, but I've never dove into the full site editing stuff yet with the patterns and stuff. But I agree with what Spencer was saying earlier about this. This is just beyond confusing. Like for a normal person, like I was confused reading it, and I've used WordPress since 2008. So it's like, if I'm having trouble with this, like how is a new person starting a website supposed to even grasp this stuff? I agree. I totally agree with what Spencer was saying. The approach for distributing some of this just needs to be rethought, I think, and I don't know how you do that. I mean, I do. Spencer was saying like he's chatting with the developers in there, and I go in there too, and I see what they're talking about in the comments, and I sometimes comment on there as well. But I don't know what the answer to this is, but like it seems to be getting more and more confusing. I
think it's called Cadence WP actually.
No, I agree. That's why I use GeneratePress, because I don't have time to deal with all of this stuff. I'm focused on building plugins, ironically, and not this stuff. So I just don't know what a normal person, how they're supposed to grasp. And like Spencer was also saying is, a lot of our business is based on support. Like someone wants help from a real human being. And like, I don't see how any normal person would get around this without help from someone else, which I would hate to see. That's how WordPress has evolved to, where you literally have to hire someone to even know how to build a website. Like the whole cool thing about WordPress 5 years ago was it was much easier to build a site, in my opinion. I think blocks are the direction we should go. As a designer, I actually think blocks are good, but like some of the stuff that's gone around outside of the blocks is so disorganized, in my opinion.
Well, Spencer's come back. There you go.
You know what we need to fear? We need to fear that the infrastructure of Chicago was built when Alexander Graham Bell was around, and a 72-degree day causes the transformers to shut off. That's what we need to fear.
Oh, I don't know. It's crazy, isn't it? So, Katie, isn't this the contradiction? Because you can see all the possibilities, the power, the improvement. I've been labelled as a hate of Gutenberg, but it's totally unfair. Like most things, Katie, I really want the best for Gutenberg because I can see it. But I also agree with Brian. You know, we're in a situation, something that was sold as making things easier, I think in a way it's made things a lot more confusing for end users. It's a bit of a contradiction. Got any insight to how we got here and how the situation might improve?
Yeah, absolutely. The purpose of the project was to create a user-friendly builder so that anybody can create a website with complex layouts. Because while Brian says it was easier 5 years ago, if you just use WordPress without a page builder or something, you couldn't create like multi-column type layouts, could you? So the goal of the project was to bring that kind of drag and drop builder experience like we have in things like Wix to WordPress. But I agree with Brian that it's not user-friendly. It's not, I mean, I don't even like the basic block editor. I just find it so unintuitive. And I've used lots of different page builders like Fusion 1 and even old ones like Visual Composer and Element or whatever. And they're all easier to use. I don't see why they had to reinvent the wheel. And this whole new pattern widget, whatever thing that's replacing widgets, block pattern.
I got to laugh, Kate. You're still so English. I love your terminology. I love your terminology.
What's happened to a template? It sounds like a template to me. And a non-WordPress user coming in will know what a template is. That's your reusable content. And fine, put a checkbox on it that allows it to be fixed and or only editable centrally, which is what this article essentially is about. That makes sense. But they just seem to have made it not thought about the user. And one good example is my dad, who he's created a few websites. I did a WordPress one when we were a web design agency for a choir that he works for. And he hates it so much that actually uses Visual Composer, but he just cannot understand it. And then he went and created his own website for a classic car club that he worked for. No, it was a church website, and he used One-on-One Internet. Do they still exist? One-on-One's Internet's free website builder. And he thought it was amazing. And he said, this is what WordPress should be. And I don't think
but the frustrating thing is there's two factors there. My comment on what you just said, Kate, which I thought was very insightful, is that it's trying to appeal to two very different groups. It's trying to the professional WordPress crowd and the end user, the people like your dad. It's not impossible, but it needed a lot more thought. You could have a cut down version that could appeal to your dad, and a more advanced version that could appeal to the WordPress professional crowd. But at the present moment, you're trying to make a kind of quasi-professional tool, and you're just pushing it on to people like your dad and expecting them to deal with it, and they're not dealing with it very well. Do you think I'm on something there, Katie?
Yeah, and this article is just one tiny symptom of that wider problem, really, which is why we've kind of expanded the discussion, I suppose, into that more generally. But it's funny because the party line is that we're meant to love Gutenberg, and as you said a minute ago, you want it to succeed. Well, of course we do, because we're in WordPress and we want WordPress to justify its market share, continue growing it, because we all win from that. But I don't think they've really got there yet with the usability.
And there's absolutely no point in talking to the Automatic crowd, because they're all lovely people. But it's almost like they've all gone to the same PR lesson and all on the same script, and you're not going to get any sense out of them. They're like PR robots, aren't they? It's all sunshine. We're all going to march on, and it's all going to be great, isn't it? So you just give up, basically, because you're not.
Yeah, and on Twitter you can't criticize Gutenberg. That doesn't go well.
No, but there you go. So Spencer, what did you think of this?
Right, like that. I love what Katie says, and using her metaphor. I always said, like with my mom with the remote control of the television. Right, I grew up in the era of 5,000 buttons, but now we've got a simple Roku remote control. It has 4 buttons on it. Even then, my mom holds it with her hand in the front to block the IR, and I'm like, don't. That's how it works. So,
I do that.
That's when you're being spoon-fed by your helper. If we start with the premise of what's wrong with WordPress,
that's Kirk's actually does that for me.
The origin of the problem is where you took a metaphor that had existed for all those years, and Gutenberg itself was foisted on us. Now, I was a vocal critic of it, of course, for 3 years, but now we're at the stage where I accept that Gutenberg, when you pick a vertical of stuff, has the features you need. My argument with all the things that are happening now is that the changes that are being made in a secret society of developers who are on themselves not doing malicious things. They have no effing idea what
they're all free by. I reckon they're all free by.
They have no idea what people are using it for. They don't, second of all, again, for those of us who make components, they have no care or concern for the legacy of plugins and themes and solutions that have been built with the tools to date. So they're ripping things out and breaking things. But the final straw, which goes back to the first story about where Matt Mullenweg's time should be spent. While I agree with Katie's premise, maybe he shouldn't be focused on micromanaging it. He needs to have the roadmap in his pocket that says, don't make changes where you call a garbage can a bin, and where you call a bus a lorry, or where you move the steering wheel from the left side of the car to the right side of the car. Because even though British and Americans have a lot of similarities, that's going to freak people out and cause very bad things to happen just by changing the names of things, let alone the functionality. You've got customers and clients and plugins and things relying, and yet they're doing this live on the fly with no public input whatsoever, no buffer at all. they've completely gone off the ranch as far as like it used to be in a plugin that was beta that you could use or not. Now it's just, God damn it, let's do it. And WooCommerce is doing the same thing. And if Mullenweg had any sense of how to prevent the things that we're all now fighting against, it would be to put into place a system where in a public way, not in a GitHub way.
I
There's a buffer.
I've got to be honest with you. I knew Matt had gone off the ranch with that interview with Harris in South Arctica where they were talking to the king penguins. I knew things were going to go to well. It's when you're having, but there we go. I came to that conclusion.
I mean, Katie said like templates. Okay, why did we need to stop calling this stuff templates in the first place? We've used templates for 18 years, and they decided we don't need to make custom templates or child themes. Okay, awesome. Finally, Gutenberg has enough stuff, and there's a bunch of things. Can we call it a template page?
Yeah.
And why does it need to be called patterns? Oh, now it's not patterns. Now it's, reusable blocks and patterns. No, now it's reusable block patterns. I mean, tomorrow it'll be blinkety blank blah blah.
I wait with
keep up with that.
I wait for bated breath where the next title is going to be for next month's title.
I mean, if we're all this confused, imagine what a normal person just wanting to build a website is thinking.
I mean, the end solution is like I suggest. There's two sides: tinkerer side and WAS solution side. And what everybody in my category is going for is we're just saying, let's take a stack of our stuff and deliver it as a full solution, and we'll call it what we want. We won't expose the clients to it even being WordPress because they don't care. Right. They just want the outcome. Just like if you went to Wix or Weebly or Shopify, nobody goes and complains to Wix and Weebly, why aren't you changing things constantly? There's a feature request, wishboard, but you don't like set your clock by that. You just, get on with your day. What's there?
Right, panel. Hopefully you can stay on for the last story. I want to discuss this last one and we'll drop the other two because we'll be here all day. And you've got other things to do, great panel. So if you're all right with that,
I have to crank up the generator.
Yeah, you're all right with that, Kurt. I want to go on to the next story.
I had a great metaphor for panels, but I'll let you go, Jonathan.
Right. So a great interview with Seth Gordon. Seth Gordon is one of always interesting. Don't agree with everything he says, but he's an individual that's influenced me. And he had a great interview about his new book and his new Quasar manifesto. So, Kurt, what did you think of this interview? What were some of the key things? How did it generally hit you? And was there any key things you got from the interview?
I actually enjoyed what Seth brought to the interview, and I enjoyed the fact that he took a contrarian opinion of his work, and they discussed it and worked through it and justified some of the points that he wanted to make. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good, and I liked that he kept talking about a race to the top and adding humanity back to the tasks that we do. You don't have to love and enjoy, and not everything has to be your inner peace work, right? But you have to add humanity to it and be productive. I enjoyed that.
So, Katie, what did you get from it? Because I was quite. I've worked with a couple of large American corporations, and to say that they are heartless organizations, it's like being inside a big white shark. It's efficient, but there's no soul in the thing at all. That's what he seemed to be saying, that it was a totally different kind of interview to the one we discussed at the beginning of this show with Matt, wasn't it, in a way? What was your own takeaways, Katie?
I thought the bits about remote work were interesting because obviously that's a huge thing in WordPress. It was quite, I don't know, negative in some ways about that, in particular about the companies aren't really giving remote workers the freedom that they might have expected from remote work. For example, it makes a claim that most companies now use things like keystroke monitors and other tools to track people's productivity and so on. And I thought, I'm not sure how much that applies to remote workers within WordPress, because in my experience, it's much more relaxed and based on trust. I wonder whether, for example, that's more common in the sort of
you
lower
got tons of time on your hands, Kate, to spy on your employees, haven't you? You just got so much time.
I know who's doing a good job, and yeah, you kind of just know. And in fact, if I need to do that, and even if I find myself looking at the few tools we have, there's a problem with that employee actually, because I should just know from their performance. So when I find myself doing that, I'm almost realizing the end is in sight, because my vast majority of my team members don't need that. And it might be because professional level jobs, you have that level of trust, whereas maybe more lower level jobs, you don't. But it didn't apply to what I know. And we did a team survey recently with Team WP, and it was interesting seeing what our team members came back with. And they talked about how much they value their flexibility and freedoms and being left to do their job, one person said. And so I thought it was interesting to see sweeping generalizations about most companies and micromanaging and monitoring their remote workers, because I don't think that's true in WordPress.
So, Brian, you know, some of his books have influenced me, like The Purple Cow and a couple of his other books have influenced me a bit. Original Thinker, he seems to be suggesting if you try and compete on price, it's just a downward spiral. And it's a bit like Katie hopefully would relate to this. So, Katie, when people ask, I'm a hard one politically to pin down. I say to people I'm a Christian socialist, and then they always, in America, they always think I'm a communist, Katie, because they don't know what a Christian socialist is. So what was your key things, Brian? It seemed to be all over the place, did it, in a way?
Well,
did it?
I kind of focused on the remote thing too, just because I always find the remote talks about that interesting. But I found it strange as well that I think in this quote, he said somewhere, humans aren't a resource, they are the point.
Yeah.
And so I found it interesting too, because I used to work, first job out of college, I went to a cubicle corporation and I worked there for a year and I was like, nope, not happening, not doing this dressing up thing in the morning, going to the cubicle. And I was doing IT work at the time, and it was like 100 people company. I was the one IT guy. So I was running around all day around dressed up in my tie. And it was just it's the worst job I've ever had in my whole life. And I was like, okay, I got to get out of this. And so going out of that, I finally branched into, WordPress and remote work. And ever since I went into remote work and WordPress space, I've gotten that feeling that humans are the point. So it's almost kind of the reverse feeling for me. But I do agree that like in the corporation type of structures that, I just felt like I was a cog in the wheel, and I didn't feel like I mattered at all. And so I do agree with him, like humans should be the point of all of this. And we should get kind of back to, I think he was focused on kind of going back to where we started.
It was a strange concoction in style, really, Brian. I agreed with some things, but you had the elements of romanticism about it. I know that's a strange word to utilize, romanticism, but it had elements. It just had a tinge. Can you see where I'm coming from, Brian?
I cannot on that one.
All right, there we go. That's my dyslexic mind.
But I agree with you. It was kind of he jumped over some places, and I think almost contradicted himself. He played both sides, I feel like, a little bit in the article. Yeah. I felt like, so that's what you're getting to.
So, Spencer, have you got any idea why I use the word romanticism?
I feel like I'm watching Top Gear, listening to Jeremy Clark talk about an old Bentley or something. Like, you're going very British on me. The thing about Seth Godin, I've been a fan of his since forever, and his famous, one of his claims to fame is he publishes a very simple, 1 or 2 paragraphs every day, right, of a marketing technique. But the thing that carries historically through all he said, which is true about remote work, is that human beings are ultimately deciding things to buy or not buy, and not for the reasons that some people believe. What the COVID and the remote work has clarified, and that's why it's so controversial, is that the Industrial Revolution created human beings, human workers, as a cog in a larger wheel that could be controlled internally. And once the secret was out that they could do more from their own devices, on their own schedule, living in their own homes with their own kids, their own families, the middle management freaked the F out, and the CEOs realized that they cannot give directions to the middle managers that make things look good, bad, because it's harder to fire people based upon performance when they're working remotely, because the facts are the facts. And that's what we're dealing with right now. We saw all the large tech corporations about 6 months ago let go tens of thousands of workers for no other reason than to bump the share price. And yet they're still enormously profitable based on reasons that have nothing to do with people coming into the office. Because Mark Benioff is as much as bribing people with $10 charity if you will just show up a day at the office. Like, how sad is that the company is infinitely profitable and he's having to beg you, please come into the office so I can justify this tower that I bought with all the vacant rooms.
What about that Apple headquarters? There's nobody there.
The bottom line is, working in a factory was a mechanical necessity. No longer is that a necessity, but all the investment structure, the middle management layers, the CEOs moving pieces around the chessboard through that lie has to end, and it's painful for the people that have been taking advantage of it. But here's the best part. Now that the cycle has changed and that there is such a tight labor market for people who can choose what life they want, most of us, I've had to do this since 2006 because life, happened to me that way. But most people who realize, like, I don't have to put a wool suit on. I don't have to get on the train. I don't have to be sitting in a room with people telling me what to do. They'll never, ever, ever go back to it, because the amount of time I work for how much I keep is so incredibly more leveraged from working at home than it would ever be by the time you factor all those costs and hassles and control issues. And nobody is going to forget that anymore. Never, ever, never.
The only thing it might affect is that I've heard, from Jason Kennekars, and he's This Week in Startups.
He's disappointed me as well, because he's who you're referring to. We both.
Well, he's placed arguments that it affects junior younger people, because they miss out on the mentorship but I think that's overplayed. You don't buy into it.
Here's why it's nonsense. We're having a show. This is show 995.
Well, it feels that way. It's not quite there, but it feels that way.
We're all over the world. I spend 6 to 8 hours a day talking to people all over the world about everything, about life, business, whatever. Where am I lacking any chances for mentorship? You mean because there's a boss not watching my head in a cubicle? I have a girlfriend who works for a major technology company. Her boss is out of her mind, makes her show up to the office where nobody is at 3 days a week, and she sits by herself in her cubicle with nothing to do. I'm just saying, just so this middle manager person can say that she's done something about it. And that's the problem, because there's no lack of mentorship. And Jason Kakanis, by the way, I knew him back in the day from the TechCrunch days when I was in the Ning space in the Silicon Valley. He flipped so fast as soon as that Silicon Bank thing went down. And he's running for the hills, because every one of the things that he's been talking about since Molly left that show, every one of them is shit the bed. All of his things, like, do this, oh, shit the bed. Do that, shit the bed. Do this, shit the bed. They're out of ideas. And all of these companies that took the big money, that have these huge, tall infrastructures of buildings and investments, don't know what to do with themselves. And the ones that are winning are the lean, mean, entrepreneurial, remote worker ones, and they can't control it. And that's what freaks him out.
Well, it's been a fabulous show, actually. Thanks, panel. So, Katie, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your thoughts? And also, Kate, can you do us a quick favour? Can you say you're bonkers? I just wanted to say that in your English accent. Are you bonkers, mate? You're bonkers. Oh, thank you, Kate. I like that. So, Kate, what's the best way for people to find out more about you? So for the company, it's our website, barn2.com. For my thoughts individually, it's Katie Keith Barn2 on Twitter. You have to come back, Katie. You've done a fabulous job.
Sounds
some
good.
great insights. Brian, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your life in the burning hell that is Phoenix?
It is hot over here. Probably our agency site, just forgemedia.io. And then I'm on Twitter at Brian Lee Jackson.
And Kurt, what's the best way to find? You're leading off, I hear, of LinkedIn, and you're going more Twitter. Is that correct?
I didn't say leaning off and more of. I'm really heavy on LinkedIn because, what is it, Jonathan? That's right. I'm the only Kurt Von Onen on LinkedIn. So if you find me, you know you got me. And
the
then
only person on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's tight. I love LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, and then of course anything Mañana No Mas is me online.
Right. And Spencer, what's the new? There must be some new product.
Well,
website,
you and I have launched the new website, shagandthedonkey.com.
I should do that actually.
That was your moniker until
it
recently.
was. Yeah. I've calmed myself down. I did listen to
you've come to the new, more mature version. WP-Launchify.com, but on Twitter and social, Spencer Foreman, no E in Foreman. And I will be there antagonizing everyone and anyone who doesn't speak the same truth that they live every day. Because to me, that's the highest attribute or value of a person, is you have one name and one reputation. So be who you are, love you or hate you, but be authentic. Don't be a duplicitous person with a one type of voice in public and another type of attitude in private.
All right, less of that. All right, so thanks, panel. It's been a fabulous show. I've really enjoyed the discussion. It's been widespread, but I thought we had some great joint insights. We will be back next week for our normal interview show, or the last Thursday of every month we do this roundtable show as well, which is a blast. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.